Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this evening's webinar. Tonight, we're going to talk about things parents can do at home for senses. Uh, so if we talk about senses, there are 8 different senses that we all know about. So we know about the 5 most of the time, but actually we have 8 different senses. So the visual, this one pertains our ability to see and process visual information. It's not just about the clarity of our vision, but also how we interpret what we see. And for learners, it's essential for reading and writing and recognizing faces and objects. Another sense is hearing. The auditory sense refers to our ability to hear and interpret sounds, and it plays a critical role in language development and communication. And it's essential for learners to hear clearly, to understand instructions, participate in discussions, and process auditory information. And then we are all also very familiar with our sense of taste. This sense is about our ability to detect and differentiate between different tastes like sweet and sour, bitter and salty, and it can influence a learner's eating habits and preferences. Some children might be more sensitive to certain tastes than others, and also many of them are picky eaters because of the sensory experience they have with food. And then another sense that we're also very familiar with is smell. This system is responsible for our sense of smell. It's deeply connected to our memories and emotions. Remember, this was our first sense, that one of the first senses that we developed. A particular scent can evoke strong feelings of recollections, and for some learners, certain smells can be calming, while others might find them overwhelming. And the last one, which we're also very familiar with, is touch. And this sense is concerned with our ability to feel and perceive textures, temperatures, and pain. And it's vital for tasks like writing, using tools, and recognizing objects by touch. Now, some learners might be more sensitive to touch or certain textures, which can impact their comfort in certain clothing or environments. Then we have 3 sensory systems that are working together, which is really important for learning. All senses are important because that's the only way that the brain can get information from its environment. But there are 3 systems built around our senses, which is essential for learning. And people kind of forget about these systems, and we're going to talk a lot about them as well. The first system is the vestibular sense. It has to do with our balance and movement. It's located here in the inner ear, and is responsible for our sense of balance, where we are in our space, and in coordination. It helps learners sit upright, walk without stumbling, and participate in physical activities. Disturbances in this system can really affect a learner's balance, also their spatial awareness, and also how they react to their environment. Some learners can really react to this strongly, so that they need to make the environment smaller to accommodate their vestibular sense. And then we get the proprioception. It's our body position, and this is also a lesser known sense because it provides information about the position of our body parts in relation to one another. So the proprioception, the best way to describe it, we have little sensors in our skin that will give information to the brain where our body parts are. So for learners, it aids them in tasks like holding a pencil, positioning paper, or coordinating movements in sports. And then the last one, and I think we're all aware of this one, because if this one is not in place, then we really battle to focus and to work, is interoception. It allows us to really feel what's happening inside our bodies, such as feeling hungry, thirsty, or the need to use the toilet. It's essential for self-regulation, as it helps learners identify and to respond to their body's needs. So these are the 8 senses, and when we talk about what can we do at home, we talk about these senses. So the best way to think about our senses is to imagine our senses as an orchestra of life. And each sense is like a different instrument group: the strings, the woodwinds, the brass, and the percussion. Individually, they can create beautiful melodies and rhythms. However, when combined, they form a symphony of experiences that breathe life into our world. So our sense of sight is akin to the string section of the orchestra, offering us the vivid tapestry of our surroundings with colors and shapes that paint the story of our day. And then the sense of hearing is like the woodwinds, introduces the layers of sound from the soft whisper of leaves to the bustling hum of the city. And then our sense of touch is reminiscent of the percussion, providing a depth and a texture to our experiences, whether it's the warmth of sunlight on our skin or the soothing rhythm of raindrops. And the sense of taste and smell, much like the brass section, bring forth bold and subtle flavors and scents that can evoke powerful memories and emotions. But beyond the symphony, we have these lesser known instruments like the vestibular sense, as I said, our sense of balance and where we are in our space, which is like the conductor and keeping the rhythm and ensuring the harmony in our bodies. That's why the vestibular sense is so important for our development. And then proprioception, you can compare with the metronome. Our sense of self, movement, and body position is like the metronome, always ticking in the background, guiding our movements and position in the world. When learners have problem with this, it has a big impact on their ability to learn and develop. And then lastly, interoception, our internal sensations are the resonant chamber of the orchestra hall itself, letting us tune into our body's needs and feelings. So in this grand orchestra of senses, every instrument, every sense has its part to play. They work in harmony to create a rich, multidimensional experience of life. And just as an orchestra would be incomplete without even one of its sections, our understanding and experience of the world rely on the intricate dance of our senses. Each note, each sensation contributes to the beautiful melody of our existence. So when we think about sensory processing, remember that's the only way that the brain can get information is through our senses and our sensory systems. So there is usually a sensory input from the receptors that's been stimulated, and then it gets to the brain where it gets processed, and then the brain has a response to it, and then and that forms a cycle. And we sometimes assume that this cycle will happen spontaneously in children. Many children really battle with this cycle and needs extra help or even just extra activities at home to develop this and to make this a very secure system. So sensory sensitivities and tendencies that individuals might have, say for instance, for taste. We have undersensitive children and oversensitive children. So if you are undersensitive in taste, you really like very strong, crunchy or spicy food. So those of you who really like a strong curry, you might have an undersensitive as experience of taste. Maybe like to chew inedible objects or overstuffs their mouths. And then oversensitive children often have a gag reflex. They will have a gag reflex soon after they've eaten, avoid crunchy textures, seek soft foods, and find some flavors in food too strong. Usually our picky eaters are within this oversensitive group. And then if we look at how we experience smell, again, undersensitive people might have a poor sense of smell, fails to notice unpleasant odors. You might pick it up, they might not. They're even unable to identify smells, where oversensitive children can't focus when certain smells are present. Excessively smells new objects. They want to kind of excessively get to know these new smells, dislike people with distinct perfumes and shampoos, and they will really react to this. So that sometimes a child will act out when there's someone in the room with an overwhelming perfume. Always think about how sensitive your child is towards smell. The same with touch. Undersensitive have a high pain tolerance, craves being wrapped up tightly in clothes and blankets, love being hugged, all those things, love deep pressure. Oversensitive have a very low pain tolerance, won't wear some clothing with textures, they get very irritated with labels and everything on clothes that will scratch them, tags on clothing causes pain to them. And then undersensitive hearing doesn't seem to hear others, speaks very loudly, trouble following verbal instructions. Oversensitive, easily distracted by background noises, speaks very softly and overwhelmed in noisy spaces. And then undersensitive in sight loses place when reading, tactile learners, trouble discerning objects and clutter, oversensitive, easily distracted by visual stimuli, dislike fluorescent lights, and avoid eye contact. If we look at how people experience the three sensory systems, we have the vestibular sense. So if it's undersensitive, you might seek intense spinning or swinging. They like that. If it's under, the more the better. They struggle with balance and coordination and frequently change position when they're seated, so they can't sit still. Oversensitive, again, avoid playground equipment or activities that involve movement and may feel nauseated or dizzy from minimal movements and experience fear or distress during activities that challenge their balance. And then proprioception, undersensitive, uses excessive force when writing. They press too hard. They will close doors too hard. They seem unaware of body positions in space, might knock over a lot of things, frequently bumps into objects or people. And then oversensitive may prefer tight clothing or enjoy being wrapped up tightly. They want their senses in their skin to be really pressed hard. Dislike activities that require strength, like opening jars, because they can't really handle the messages from their skin to their brain, and they avoid situations where they might get jostled or bumped. And the last one, the interoception, our internal sensations. If it's undersensitive, they're difficult recognizing the sensation of hunger or fullness. They don't know when they're hungry. They don't know when they had enough, when they had sufficient. Doesn't realize the need to use the bathroom until it's urgent. May not notice when they're cold or hot until extreme symptoms show. And then oversensitive in interoception, they're usually aware of their internal sensations like their heartbeat or their digestion, experience discomfort from minor internal sensations, and frequently complains about their stomach that pains or ache or other internal discomfort. So this chart is a visual representation of how children might respond to different sensory experience. So imagine it's like how we might react to temperatures. Some like it hot and some like it cold. And some may not notice a change and some will seek out their perfect temperature. So let's look at the green circle, which is low registration. This is like a child who doesn't notice it's cold until they are shivering. They might not react to or even notice certain sensory inputs. For example, they might not feel that their shoe is untied or that their hands are dirty. If you look at the blue circle, that we call sensation-seeking children, and this is like a child who loves jumping into a cold pool on a hot day. And these children actively look for more sensory experiences. They might love loud music, bright lights, or spinning in circles. If we look at the purple circle, which is the sensory sensitive children, this is like a child who feels cold even when everyone else is warm. And these children are more sensitive to sensory inputs than others. A tag on a shirt might bother them, or they might find a room too bright or too noisy. And then if we look at the yellow circle, which is sensation avoiding, and this is like a child who avoids the cold by staying inside. They might avoid certain sensory experience because they are too overwhelmed by it, or they are even uncomfortable. And they could dislike crowded places or certain textures of or food. So on the left, we have passive self-regulation, and that means that these children might not do much about their sensory feelings. They either don't notice it or just tolerate them. And then on the right hand, we have active regulation, means that these children take steps to manage their sensory feelings. They either seek out or avoid certain sensations based on how they feel. And lastly, the term hypersensitivity or high neurological threshold and hypersensitivity low neurological threshold refer to how easily a child notices sensory information. Think of it like a volume knob. Hypersensitive children have their volume set high, so it takes a lot for them to notice anything. A hypersensitive child have it set very low, so even minor things can be very noticeable for them. So in essence, every child has their own volume knob, setting and way of managing sensory experiences, and it's crucial for parents to observe and understand their child's unique needs and reactions to support them best. So we need to talk about sensory loads because this will make your life so much easier at home. So for this, I know there are 4 different types, but for our conversation, we are going to focus mainly on sensory seekers and sensory avoiders. So sensory seekers are undersensitive to sensory input, while sensory avoiders are oversensitive, as I just explained with the previous slide. So some people may show a combination also of these reactions. And knowing the triggers can help you find ways to help your children cope better. So let's look at sensory seekers first. So they appear louder and more uncoordinated than their peers. They stand unusually close to others. Techniques like elbow rule can teach them a little bit about personal space. They have a high pain tolerance. They walk with very heavy steps, enjoy jumping or bumping into things, sometimes appearing reckless, and not realize their strength, possibly breaking toys or accidentally hurting others, and favor energetic playground games and often touch objects or people nearby. And they're also drawn to loud sounds. So your sensory seeker gets energy from sensory experiences. The better, the higher, the more is the language that they do. So if you have a sensory seeker, then you know they not going to get tired from any sensory input. Even in relationships, you might think about the people in your house who are the sensory seekers, because after a full day, they are the ones who really want to go out for more sensory experiences. It can never be enough. It can never be loud enough. It can never be hard enough or fast enough. Those are our sensory seekers. And they sometimes even chew on their clothing or non-food items just to get some extra sensory input. Then you get your sensory avoiders. These are the people who really are very picky eaters. They avoid certain textures, certain taste. They avoid close physical contact, such as hugs and kisses, even from family. They easily startled by unexpected sounds or bright lights. They don't like it too hard. They don't like it too loud. They don't like too bright lights. It will tire them out. It takes away their energy. They detect background noises very easily, who other people will overlook, and even that will have an impact on them. Many of these sensory avoiders really hate white noise at work, for instance, as adults, because they can't really hear it, but they are so sensitive to sensory input that their brains are still processing it and sending messages, and they have to cope with it. They express discomfort if touched or bumped, especially on in group play. So if you are a sensory avoider and there's lots of contacts, you might get easily irritated and even might act out if there is too much information. So they don't like clothing that they find scratchy, tight, or simply uncomfortable. And they hesitate to use playground equipment. They don't like to swing. They don't like any intense sensory input. They try to avoid that because they get easily tired of it. And they really struggle with spatial awareness, unsure if their body's position is relative to people or objects. And they seek out quieter spaces, often steering clear of crowded areas. So if you are a sensory avoider, you will be the one after a full day of work when you get home and you need time just to unwind, maybe quiet, just some quiet time, just to reboot your sensory system before you can engage with your family. So it is, you need to manage the sensory load, because a sensory avoiders sensory bucket will get filled very quickly. In children, if that bucket is filled quickly, then they will start acting out. They will throw tantrums. They will do things that is not acceptable. So it's very important to think about your child as either a sensory seeker or a sensory avoider. If they're a sensory avoider, you need to know that at the children's party, they will need sensory breaks halfway. Otherwise, they are going to start acting out or crying or complaining, or maybe kind of distance themselves from the other children. So it's a very important thing to manage from a sensory point. So how do we manage sensory loads at home? I think consistent routine plays a big role. Maintain a predictable daily routine. Knowing what to expect can help lessen the anxiety, especially for children who are sensory sensitive. Create a designated quiet space at home where your child can retreat when feeling overwhelmed. This could be a dimly lit room, a corner with a cushion, or a tent with their favorite soft toys. You'll find in most of our Kiro schools, they have these spaces, especially in ECD classes, where children can then retreat to if they are sensory sensitive. And then consider using sensory tools like you get these heavy blankets that you can put, because that will reboot their prior perceptive system. You get fidget toys, you get noise cancelling headphones, and you get very advanced ones which a child can then use in the classroom when they are working on their own and you don't want them to hear the other noise. And it can really comfort and help them to manage their sensory overstimulation. And also look for the best clothing options. Tag-free clothing, maybe seamless clothing. It can really help to wash these clothes several times to soften them after you bought them, because it really helps these children. And then encourage your child to communicate their feelings, because this can be verbally or through tools like emoticons or cards for younger children. Knowing when they're beginning to feel overwhelmed can help them in timely interventions. You also get, if you Google it, you get these little sensory like a meters where they just have a little thing from overwhelmed to underwhelmed, and they kind of just let you know where they are on this. It's important for them because we would like them to manage it themselves at some point. So it's important for them then to know that they can communicate it, and that's okay. You need to understand that it's okay if you are sensory, very sensitive, because you can't really do anything about it apart from managing it. It's also important, especially with picky eaters, to think about the dietary considerations and the variety of textures, the temperatures. Talk to someone who knows this very well, and you get your dietitians are usually very good with this. Do not wait with picky eaters. Get the right advice, because that will really help them. And then also gradually expose your child to new sensory experience, but always at their pace. For instance, if they're wary of loud noises, you might start with softer sounds and gradually increase the volume over time. And then integrate sensory play activities into your daily routine. This could include sand play, water play, Play-Doh, allowing them to explore different textures in a controlled environment. And I'm going to give you a lot of activities that you can do for this. And then do not wait. Get professional help if you are concerned. In this field, most occupational therapists are trained for this. There are also some play therapists that are trained for this. So they will do a specific analysis and assessment to determine your child's sense sensitivity as well as the sensory integration. It's always good to know this about your child because it will really help you to understand their behavior in certain situations. Because many times, remember, as I said before, behavior is a form of communication. So, and they communicate the sensory overload through their behavior. So if they throw a tantrum, or if they act out, or if they start screaming, or whatever they're doing, lying on the ground, moaning, those are all ways to tell you most of the times that my sensory bucket is either overloaded or underloaded. So it's empty or so, and that's a good thing to know about your child. So let's start talking about things that you can do at home. And I'm going to talk about all 8 of them. So it's quite a long list, but remember, you can request this slide deck from your school. I will send it to them tomorrow morning. So you don't have to make notes. I'm going to tell you a lot of things, but then you can use these tips and tricks at your own leisure. So please request this from your school, but let's go through all of them. So one of the things that's important for me when we talk about the visual sense is that we need to contrast colors and patterns. Babies are drawn to high contrast colors and patterns, especially black and white. So provide toys and mobiles and play mats that have these contrasts to stimulate their visual attention. It's also important to spend lots of time face to face with the child. Remember, recognition of faces is a very natural part of their development, and this helps them focus on features and aids them in their facial recognition. And then encourage visual tracking by slowly moving toys and objects across the child's field of vision. Keep it in their fields of vision and help them to follow it with their eyes. And then also introduce them to different textures. Introduce books and toys with different textures. Feeling while seeing can also enhance visual understanding. And then what is also important is to use toys that encourage focus changes, like a soft toy that you can squeeze or can pop out or slightly further slightly further from their original position. Play hide and seek games with toys. This not only enhances the visual skills, but also develops memory and anticipation. And then what I like to do when I'm reading with my child is, when reading or going through picture books, point to the different objects, name them, and describe the colors and the shapes. That is very important for maths as well as reading, and that's something that we can do from a very young age. And then regular outdoor play allows children to focus on distant objects, enhancing their depth perception. Get them out of the house, in the garden, and if you are privileged enough to go away for weekends to outdoor activities, use that. Also, mazes and puzzles are really useful as they grow a little older. Introduce simple mazes and puzzles. These challenge their visual spatial abilities and their problem-solving skills. Mirror play is a wonderful thing, so let them explore their reflection. It aids in self-recognition and enhances their understanding of expressions, and also play games like mimicking different expressions, give it a name. Expressions and emotions, play emotion games where you show different emotions and they have to make it in the mirror as well. Sorting games, very important. Color, shape, size. It gives them the visual discrimination skills, but also the vocabulary that we need for later literacy and mathematical skills. I love shadow play. You use torches or lamps to create a shadow on the wall. Let children identify and even form shapes and visual imagination with their hands and their bodies. And you can do many things, those games that we played as children as well. And then again, it's important to limit screen time, because technology can still offer a lot of educational benefits, but it's essential to balance the screen time with the real world visual experiences. When the child has a lot of screen time, you need to do a lot of these other activities to balance it out. And then I can't stress enough that you need to have your eyes of your child tested. It is very important that you will always test your child's eyes often. It's just regular checkups can really help timely identification. And it's not only about visual perfection, it's about all the other accommodation skills that are also just as important as good eyesight. Let's look at hearing. I think the best thing is regular conversations with your child. It helps them discern different sounds, intonations, building their auditory processing skills. If you don't have a book with rhymes and songs, go and buy one tomorrow. Singing to them lullabies, nursery rhymes. The rhythm and the melody is the most important part of literacy development. Many times people ask us, why don't we teach children at a very young age to read and write? Because singing and rhymes is your first way of reading. Remember, listening is the basis of reading. So if you work a lot on listening, then you get your child ready for reading. And before they go to school, that's our reading that we do. That's our writing that we do. We sing and we use rhymes because that is the basis. The more we do that, the better your child will read. If you teach them to read too early, you are literally harming their literacy ability. And then listen to nature. Take walks. Ask the children to identify sounds, birds chirping, leaves rustling, also the direction. I always like this to be integrated with your natural doing of the day. There mustn't be, I'm going to sit now and do these things. It must be part of your day. And then make your house full of simple musical instruments, tambourines, drums, rattles. All those things are really good for children. And then if you don't have time to read, you get lots of audiobooks or people that tell stories that you can put in your car. I love putting songs that they can sing with in the car. Also, they can listen to audiobooks in the car when you have to drive far, and maybe talk a little bit about the narrative and identify the characters with them. Again, it should be fun, not scholastic activities. And then also use toys or apps that require matching objects or animals to their respective sound. Also follow the sound, blindfold your child or ask them to close their eyes, make a sound in different parts of the room and have them point or move towards that sound so that they can develop their auditory ability. Clapping patterns is a very important part. Remember, the brain develops through rhythms. The brain wants patterns. So if you do these clapping exercises and they have to replicate them, repeat them, it really helps them for phonics and phonemic awareness and all those important literacy aspects. That's what we should do with our ECD children, is to do these things, because that wires the brain for later literacy and mathematical activities. And then also to identify sound play recordings. You find them online on YouTube. You find various sounds. You can just press play, and then they will hear a car's horn, a dog barking, a bell ringing, and they just need to identify them. You'll get literally thousands of these. You can just Google auditory sounds for my child to identify, and you'll get wonderful things that you can use. And then interactive games, play those old games like Simon Says, Follow the Leader, because they need to listen, they need to act on it, they need to follow auditory instructions. Sometimes it's also good to play two sounds simultaneously and ask the child to filter and listen to one specific sound, because this can help them in noisy environments. Again, you get amazing things on YouTube that is aimed specifically at that. And then echo games, say a word or phrase and have the child repeat it back to you. It enhances auditory memory. So let's move over to taste. I think taste is very important because it also has a big brain development aspect to it. And sometimes we only think about taste as part of eating. But identify different tastes and all of that is also a big aspect of language development as well as literacy development. So use a blindfold, offer your child different kinds of foods and ask them to identify the taste. They can identify the food, or they can identify the taste, and it's good for them to do it without any visual distractions. Set aside time where your primary goal is to explore and not necessarily to eat different kinds of food. This can include touching the food, smelling it, tasting small amounts of the new foods, and then also to discuss flavors, especially after a meal. Talk about was it sweet, was it sour, and was this help also a lot with the vocabulary around taste. And then if you have the space, grow your own garden, get the children outside. I think there are so many research that's been done on vegetables and how to grow your vegetable gardens and the positive impact it has on children's development. It's a wonderful integrated activity. It develops everything in one shot. So if you have the space, start doing gardening with your children and go up to preparing the food that you grow if you have space where you are living. Smell is also a very important aspect of brain development. You get a lot of these scented Play-Doh with essential different oils like vanilla, lemon, lavender. It provides a tactile as well as a smell experience, very good for that development. I always like to use herbs and spices, and you put them out on the table and the children will smell, and if they're brave enough, taste some of them. And it allows the learner to smell them and then to discuss the differences. It will just enhance the palate as well as the vocabulary around these things. So if you would like children to be emotionally literate, a lot of that is also based in smell. So if they can recognize smells, it helps them also with their emotional literacy. And then play memory games, like use jars filled with various scented items like coffee beans, citrus peels, flowers, and let the child smell one jar, then try to match it with another jar with the same kind of scent. So solely relying on their senses, so doing it blindfolded helps a lot. And then again, go into nature. There are many, many smells there which you can discuss with your child. And then you also get these scented pens and paints that you can use. Works very well. Again, the conversation around that is the most important part. And then you can create these scented sensory bins. You fill them with materials like scented rice, beans, or pasta, and infuse them with different scents using essential oils. It's also important to explore textures and scents. So you combine sometimes a tactile and a smell stimulation. For instance, let the learners play with rose petals, allowing them to feel the texture and also smell the scent simultaneously. We would like these things to be integrated. The activity for the picture there is a scented water play, where you put different kinds of scents into the water, and as part of the play they will then experience that the things are smelling differently, have different flavors. And then again, remember, smell is the thing that activates a lot of experiences, lots of memories, emotions. So it's good to use that and to recall memories. So sometimes you might smell freshly baked bread and you can talk. So what does this smell reminds me? It reminds me of Granny's kitchen. So that you can also good for many things of brain development. And then also use calming scents. Lavender have a calming properties, so you can introduce these scents during relaxation, mindfulness activities, nap times, because it can be very beneficial. Also visit different environments. So when you are at the shop and you're near the fish, they must smell it. They must say if it's pleasant or not. At the bakery, so that they can connect what they smell, and the brain can then process it. Remember, we would like the brain to process the information it gets from the environment through its senses, and smell plays a big role in it. If we start talking about touch, texture boards and books, you get many of these books with different textures. You get boards that they can feel, with sandpaper, silk, bubble wrap, all those things. Many activities that can keep them Busy, again, you can create a sensory bin with all these different textures in. Play-Doh is a big thing. And then water play. Water is one of the best educational toys you can get. So you can add things like ice cubes and sponges and marbles and very tactile sensations that they can get through that. Again, go to nature, because these things are all integrated in your garden and in nature. And then blindfold games is very nice for touch. Blindfold them, because we always kind of want them to use the one sense sometimes, just to train the brain to get the information from that sense. Finger painting is an amazing tactile exercise. Again, gardening is great. Take your children to the kitchen. Cooking and baking, also one of the best ways to develop your child's senses. From washing the vegetables, stirring, mixing, all those things. And remember to use the verbs and the words. The kitchen is one of the best places to do vocabulary with children. And then bubble wrap popping is it's a good tactile activity. It stimulates a lot. It's also fun, and it's also good for stress relief. And for a child who's acting out or who needs something else, bubble wrap that you are popping is a good activity to calm them down. And then you also get therapy putty activities, because you can squeeze. You get this therapy putty where you can squeeze and pull and mold. It's not like normal clay, because it offers a bit of resistance. That's good for muscle development. You get these at all these educational shops. Or if you want to make your own Play-Doh, you just make them a little bit less, bit thicker, so that it gives a bit more resistance. And then also you get weighted toys or blankets. You also buy these from your autism shops. It helps a lot for self-regulation. So it's a blanket, but it has a lot of heavy stuff inside. Might have kind of sand or something, which is you put it on your shoulders, it helps you to regulate. You even get normal soft toys, but they are just much heavier. Helps a lot with self-regulation for children. Fidget toys helps a lot for many things. You get stress balls, sensory rings, textured tangles that they can play with. Very good also for fine motor skills. And then brushing therapy, you will get that often. Your occupational therapist will show you exactly how to do it. It helps with the tactile sense and the touch to develop that. And then also you get letter cards where you can where the letters are made from sand or buttons or yarn, and this helps letter recognition and offers also a textile experience. And then something that you can also do is when you give children different swatches of fabric and ask them to match them by touch with their eyes closed. So also a good exercise. And then also use items like warm packs, cold packs, room temperature objects to let children differentiate between the different temperatures. So when we talk about the vestibular system, we always need to talk about the over-responsive, as I said, the hypersensitivity one. When a child has an over-responsive vestibular system, they are really hypersensitive to movement experiences. This means that ordinary motion experiences such as swinging or even riding in a car can be overwhelming or even terrifying for them. And they might appear fearful of these activities that involve movement or height or avoiding playgrounds, escalators or stairs. So if you see these things, it's always better than to talk to an occupational therapist to help you and just to ensure that your child, what your child's level of hypersensitivity is. Because if you are going to continue with an activity, it's going to be very unpleasant for this child and will do more harm than good. So signs of over-responsive vestibular systems, and this is just for you to kind of take note of, so that you can go and consult a specialist if you pick up some of these things. So avoidance of fast-paced or spinning activities. They have a reluctance or fear of heights. They dislike being upside down. Preference for feet to always touch the ground. They get motion sickness very easily. Difficulty with activities that require balance. So it doesn't mean that if your child has motion sickness, they are hypersensitive now because of their vestibular system. These are just signs. If you kind of pick up a lot of these things, that you need to go and see a specialist to assist you with this hypersensitivity. If you have an over-responsive one, so there are a few tips. Start slowly, introduce movements, activities gradually, allowing the child to build confidence. If you're about to start an activity that might be challenging, always give your child a heads up so that they can prepare themselves. Safety first, and then give them control over the activity when possible, allowing them to stop if they feel uncomfortable, so have a safe word. And before and after challenging activities, provide deep pressure or weighted activities that can be calming for children. So for that, you just kind of hold them, give them deep pressure or put something heavy on them, give them a very deep hug, or just massage them with very deep strokes that help them also a lot. So if you have an under-responsive vestibular system, which is hypersensitivity, so that's on the opposite end of the spectrum. Children who are under-responsive to vestibular stimuli actively seek intense movement experiences and seem to have a high tolerance or even a craving for such sensations. So they might appear fearless, enjoy spinning, jumping, and moving fast, and have difficulty sitting still. So some of the signs: they constant need to move, jump, or spin, appear restless or fidgety when seated, enjoyment of fast or spinning rides, and difficulty understanding spatial orientation, and might appear clumsy or unaware of the risks. So if you pick up a lot of these things, it's actually good to have it checked out. So for these children, to ask them to sit still for a long time, it's really not something that they can do. So provide frequent movement breaks for them, allow them the opportunity to move and jump at regular intervals. So if they had to sit still for a while, then they need to do this. Also, they need to engage in physical activities like sports and dance and swimming. While it's essential to let them explore, always make sure that the safety boundaries are there. They tend to get hurt very easily because they are pushing the boundaries. For them, you can use safety gear like helmets and knee pads, especially if they are risk-taking. And then engage in structured movement activities such as obstacle courses to give them some form of direction and to develop this further. So things that you can do at home, keeping in mind if you have an over or an undersensitive child. Swinging is a very good activity to develop vestibular sense because it develops your position in space. Spinning is a good one. Activities like merry-go-round, spinning in office chair, just twirling around can be really beneficial. Rocking, gentle rocking motions such as rocking a chair or a cradle. And then rolling, encourage learners to roll down gentle heels or across the floor in controlled movements. And then climbing is also a very good one. Balancing activities is good for all children. So you can just even draw a line on the ground and ask them just to walk toe heel on it. Tilting boards, you get them everywhere where they tilt from side to side, helping learners to enhance their balance. Riding bicycles, tricycles, jumping is a good activity. Simple games where the child tilts their head from side to side, up and down, can really be stimulating. Dancing, as I said. Wheelbarrow walking is also good for the shoulder girdle, as I said last week. Tummy time for infants is also very good for this. Water play obstacle courses, hanging upside down, but remember some children really find this uncomfortable, so just make sure that your child is okay with it, and then also use different textures and surfaces for the child to walk, like sensory pathways, gravel, grass, sand, and they need to name it and mention it. And then we're going to end off with a little bit of proprioception. So these are all things that will give some information to the brain coming from the skin and the body's position. So any weight-bearing activities, pushing and pulling heavy objects, doing animal walks, climbing on playground equipment will work. Resistance activities where playing with resistant bands or stretching rubber tubing, pushing against walls, play wrestling with soft cushions, deep pressure using weighted blankets or vests, but again under professional guidance, and giving them firm hugs using squeeze toys works a lot. And then jumping and landing, jumping on a trampoline, or trampolines are great for all children. Bouncing on a large exercise ball is also great for all children. Playing hopscotch or jumping from one cushion to another. And then texture walks, where they walk on sand, grass, pebbles, even texture mats can help play. Dough and clay play is also very important, making shapes, sculptures, patterns, squeezing, rolling, pincing, and also use these verbs when they do these things. And then also games that require force regulations like tug of war, arm wrestling, where they need to do it hard and stop and start. All those things are important. And then again, fine motor activities. We had a whole talk about it last week. And then also blindfolded activities, identify objects by touch or drawing with closed eyes. Blindfolded obstacle courses can be very lots of fun. Balancing on one foot or using a balance board, walking on a beam or a line on the ground. And then again, Simon Says and Hokey Pokey, those are all very good games that we know very well. I'm going to end off with interoception. Encourage children to close their eyes and take a moment to notice how the different parts of their bodies feel. Create visual charts with various levels of hunger and thirst before meals or snack times, and ask children to point to how hungry or thirsty they feel, because this can help them to start to recognize the sensations associated with hunger and thirst. And ask your child to check in with their body's temperature. Do they feel hot, cold, or just right? And this can be done after playing outside, coming inside, before and after baths. And then create a wheel that has different emotions depicted on it, such as happy, sad, and angry, and discuss with your child the physical sensations they might feel with each of these emotions. And then breathing exercises, one of the best ways for children to self-regulate for anxiety. So ask them to pay attention to how they feel when they take deep, slow breaths. And the best way for an anxiety child to breathe is to use the fingers. And remember, it's the breathing out that regulates them. So when they go through the thumb, that's in, and then they have to hold their breath, and then slowly until you get to the pinky, that all the air must be out, and then you go to the thumb, hold it in, keep it for a while, and as the fingers grow, they kind of let the air out, and that's a very easy way for them then to time and to time the breathing out. Mirror games, we talked a lot about that already. Role-playing games. Use descriptive vocabulary, because that is very important, especially if there's a bubbly in the tummy, or if muscles feel tight. Body needs routine, and then also tactile play helps a lot. While reading stories, discuss how the characters may feeling inside based on their actions. Yoga is good for internal sensations. Meditation is good for that. Heartbeat exercises, especially with children with anxiety or who acts out easily, when they can feel their heart beats faster, that's a way to help them to regulate. And then create sensory bottles with various materials. Ask children to shake them and watch them, and then discuss the feeling they might have while watching the material move. So this is all I'm going to do tonight. Are there any questions at this point in time? I'm going to go to the Q&A and see if there are any questions. So the recording will be available. You can just inquire at your school. They will give you the direction. So there's another question. Is it possible for a child to be a bit of both sensory seeker and sensory avoider? Yes. I just kind of took the two opposites, both of them, and in certain situations it can also differ. And as the child grows older, that can also change. But if you're unsure, then it's best to get somebody that's a specialist to help you with that. Are there any other questions? Again, you can request this PowerPoint deck from your school. I will circulate it tomorrow morning. So if you would like a copy of all the ideas, ask your preschool, and they will then forward it to you. So I'll make sure it is there tomorrow morning. So if you would like to see the PowerPoint and have it as a reference, you're more than welcome. Just request it from your preschool. I usually send it to the head of the preschool early the next day. They will also redirect you to the recording so that you can watch it again, or if you would like to share it with someone else. It seems like we have all the questions. So from that, goodbye. Thanks for attending tonight. I hope it was useful. Have a wonderful evening, and you are more than welcome to log off. Thank you so much. And I'm Johan van Loo, and I'm from Kiro's Learner Support Unit.